Ed Sullivan crouched down beside the Steinway grand piano in Studio 50, listening to the sound of a child sobbing underneath. It was November 10, 1962, and 12-year-old Stevie Wonder was scheduled to make his national television debut in 40 minutes when Ed discovered the young musical prodigy curled up in the dark space beneath the piano, overwhelmed by the pressure of performing for 60 million Americans. "I can't see them, but I can hear them," Stevie whispered through his tears, referring to the studio audience filing into their seats. "There are so many people, Mr. Sullivan. What if they don't like me? What if I'm not as good as everyone says I am?" Ed realized he was looking at a blind child who had been thrust into the spotlight before he was emotionally ready, a musical genius who was still just a scared little boy from Detroit who wanted to go home to his mother. Before you hear this incredible story, hit that subscribe button, because what you're about to witness is how Ed Sullivan helped a frightened child find the courage to share his extraordinary gift with the world. To understand why 12-year-old Stevie Wonder was so terrified, you need to understand the enormous pressure that had been placed on him since being discovered by Motown Records just 2 years earlier. Stevie wasn't just another talented child performer, he was being hailed as a musical prodigy, whose blindness seemed to have enhanced rather than limited his extraordinary abilities with multiple instruments and his incredible voice. Born Stevlin Morris in Saginaw, Michigan, and raised in Detroit, Stevie had been blind from birth due to complications related to his premature birth. But what he lacked in sight, he more than made up for in musical ability. By age 10, he could play piano, harmonica, drums, and bongos with professional-level skill, and his voice carried an emotional depth that seemed impossible for someone so young. Berry Gordy, at Motown Records, had signed Stevie in 1961, when he was just 11 years old, recognizing that the boy possessed something truly special. They had given him the stage name Little Stevie Wonder, and his debut single I Call It Pretty Music, but the old people call it the blues, had showcased his remarkable talent to the music industry. But by November 1962, with his hit single Fingertips climbing the charts, the pressure on Stevie had become intense. He was being marketed as a phenomenon, a miracle child whose blindness and musical gifts made him a fascinating figure for both media and audiences. Everyone wanted to see the blind boy who could play multiple instruments and sing like someone twice his age. "The boy is remarkable," Ed had told his wife Sylvia after first hearing Stevie's recordings. "But I worry about putting a 12-year-old child on television in front of such a massive audience. That's a lot of pressure for any performer, let alone someone so young. I hope his family and his record company are protecting him from the worst aspects of show business." Ed's concerns had been reinforced during the week leading up to Stevie's Sullivan Show appearance. During rehearsals, Stevie had seemed confident and professional when playing music, but Ed had noticed that the boy became quiet and withdrawn when not performing. He seemed overwhelmed by the attention and the constant stream of adults telling him how special and important he was. "He's just a little boy," Ed had observed to his musical director after watching Stevie during breaks between rehearsals. "Yes, he's incredibly talented, but underneath all that talent is a child who probably wants to play with toys and watch television like any other 12-year-old. Instead, he's being treated like a commodity, something to be marketed and promoted." The pressure had intensified when Stevie learned that his Sullivan Show appearance would be seen by one of the largest television audiences in history. The show regularly drew 60 million viewers, and Stevie's appearance had been heavily promoted as the debut of a musical miracle. The weight of those expectations had apparently become too much for the young boy to handle. Ed found Stevie under the piano 30 minutes before showtime, after a frantic search by the production staff. The boy had disappeared from his dressing room, leaving his Motown handlers confused and worried. It was Ed himself who thought to check the unusual hiding places that a frightened child might choose. "Stevie," Ed said gently as he knelt beside the piano, "can you tell me what's wrong?" The response came in a small, scared voice that was completely different from the confident performer Ed had heard during rehearsals. "Mr. Sullivan, there are so many people out there. I can hear them talking and moving around. I know I can't see them, but I can feel them watching me. What if I mess up in front of all those people? What if I disappoint everyone who thinks I'm supposed to be something special? Ed felt his heart break as he heard the fear and vulnerability in this child's voice. Despite his extraordinary talent, Stevie was still a 12-year-old boy who had been placed in a situation that would be challenging for adult performers. "Stevie, can I tell you something?" Ed asked, sitting down on the floor beside the piano so he could speak to the boy at his level. "I've been in television for many years, and I've worked with hundreds of performers. Do you know what separates the great ones from the good ones?" "What?" Stevie asked, his voice still shaky but curious. "The great performers understand that the audience isn't there to judge them or to catch them making mistakes," Ed explained. "The audience is there because they want to be amazed, they want to be moved, they want to feel something special. When you perform, you're not performing for critics or for people who want you to fail. You're performing for people who are hoping you'll show them something beautiful." Ed paused, then continued with something more personal. "Stevie, I've watched you rehearse this week. I've seen how music changes you, how you become completely absorbed in it. When you're playing music, you're not thinking about the audience or about being nervous. You're just sharing something that comes from inside you. That's what great performers do, Izzy. They share themselves through their art." "But what if I'm not as good as people think I am?" Stevie asked, voicing his deepest fear. "What if everyone has been wrong about me?" Ed smiled, though he knew Stevie couldn't see it. "Stevie, let me ask you something. Do you love music?" "Yes, sir, more than anything. And when you play music, does it make you happy?" "It makes me feel like I can do anything, like I'm free." "Then that's all that matters," Ed said firmly. "You're not performing tonight to prove anything to anyone. You're performing because you love music, and because sharing that love with other people is a gift. The people in that audience, they're not there to judge whether you're good enough. They're there because they've heard that there's a young man who loves music so much that it shines through everything he does." Ed stood up and offered his hand to help Stevie out from under the piano. "Now, are you going to let fear keep you from sharing that gift? Or are you going to go out there and show America what happens when someone truly loves music?" Stevie took Ed's hand and allowed himself to be helped to his feet. He was still nervous, but there was a new determination in his posture. "Sullivan, will you stay where I can hear you while I'm performing?" Stevie asked. "I know I can't see you, but if I can hear you, I'll know I'm not alone out there." "I'll be right there in the wings," Ed promised. "And if you get nervous, just remember that everyone in that audience wants you to succeed. They're not your enemies, they're your friends." As they walked back toward the dressing room area, Ed continued to offer encouragement and practical advice. "Remember, Stevie, when you're performing, focus on the music. Don't think about how many people are watching. Just listen to the music and let it guide you. That's when you're at your best, Manders, when you're lost in the music." 20 minutes later, at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, The Ed Sullivan Show went live to the nation. Ed's introduction of Stevie was warm and paternal, emphasizing both the boy's remarkable talent and his youth. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special young performer with us tonight. He's only 12 years old, but he has a musical gift that defies explanation. Please welcome little Stevie Wonder." Stevie walked onto the stage, led by one of the show's staff members, to enthusiastic applause. Ed could see that the boy was still nervous, but there was also a new confidence in his movement that hadn't been there under the piano. Stevie took his position at the harmonica and began his performance of Fingertips, the song that had made him famous. From the very first note, it was clear that something magical was happening. All of Stevie's nervousness seemed to disappear the moment he began making music. His harmonica playing was incredibly sophisticated for someone so young, and his stage presence was magnetic despite his youth and blindness. Ed watched from the wings, amazed by the transformation he was witnessing. The frightened child who had been hiding under the piano had become a confident performer who commanded the attention of everyone in the studio. More importantly, Stevie seemed to be genuinely enjoying himself, lost in the music just as Ed had encouraged him to be. The audience response was immediate and overwhelming. They weren't just applauding a talented child. They were witnessing the debut of someone who was clearly destined to become a major force in American music. Stevie's performance transcended novelty and entered the realm of genuine artistry. When Stevie finished Fingertips, the studio erupted in applause that seemed to go on forever. Ed walked onto the stage and put his arm around the young performer who was beaming with joy and relief. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ed said to the television audience, "you have just witnessed the beginning of what I predict will be one of the great careers in American music. Stevie Wonder is not just a talented child, he's a true artist who happens to be 12 years old." After the cameras stopped rolling, Stevie sought out Ed immediately. "Mr. Sullivan, thank you," Stevie said, his voice filled with emotion. "I was so scared, but when I started playing, I remembered what you said about the audience wanting me to succeed. I could feel their energy, and it made me want to give them my best." Ed knelt down to Stevie's level again. "Stevie, what you did tonight was incredible. You didn't just perform it, you shared your love of music with millions of people, and they felt it. That's what great artists do." The response to Stevie's Sullivan Show debut was overwhelming and unanimously positive. The performance became one of the most talked about moments in the show's history, with critics and audiences praising both Stevie's remarkable talent and his natural stage presence. More importantly, for Stevie personally, the experience gave him confidence that would define the rest of his career. He learned that his youth and blindness weren't limitations to be overcome. They were simply part of who he was, and audiences would accept and love him for his authentic self. "That night on The Sullivan Show taught me something crucial about performing," Stevie reflected years later. "Ed Sullivan helped me understand that the audience isn't the enemy. They're people who want to share in something beautiful. Once I understood that, I was never really nervous on stage again." Ed Sullivan's gentle intervention with the frightened 12-year-old became one of his most meaningful mentoring moments, though it remained largely private for many years. Ed's ability to recognize a child in crisis and provide exactly the right kind of support and encouragement demonstrated the kind of leadership that made him legendary in the entertainment industry. "Stevie Wonder taught me something about courage that night," Ed reflected years later. "He showed me that being afraid doesn't disqualify you from greatness. It just means you have to find the strength to move beyond the fear." What impressed me most wasn't his talent, although that was extraordinary. What impressed me was his willingness to trust me, and to try again even when he was terrified. Stevie Wonder went on to become one of the most successful and influential musicians in history, winning multiple Grammy Awards and creating music that changed popular culture. But his relationship with Ed Sullivan remained special throughout Ed's life, representing the moment when a scared little boy learned that sharing his gifts with the world was not something to fear but something to celebrate. The story of Stevie's Sullivan Show debut demonstrates the importance of recognizing when young people need encouragement rather than pressure, and shows how the right kind of support at the right moment can help a frightened child find the courage to share extraordinary gifts with the world. If this story of overcoming fear and finding courage moved you, hit that subscribe button and tell us, have you ever helped a young person find the confidence to share their talents? Sometimes the most important thing we can do is remind talented people that their gifts are meant to be shared, not hidden away because of fear.